Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. The division championship Minnesota Twins are looking to go all the way to the World Series in 2024. Bolstered by inspirational shortstop Carlos Correa, a healthy Brian Buxton, and rookie phenom Royce Lewis, plus a pitching staff led by Pablo Lopez and an outstanding bullpen featuring Johan Duran, the Twins are the best bargain in the major leagues, and Target Field is the best venue in baseball. Sheridan Dulas & Kins, PA, a family and criminal defense law firm, has been serving clients in Dakota County and throughout Minnesota for over 40 years. Ranked a Tier 1 Best Law Firm by U.S. News and World Report every year since 2009, Sheridan Dulas & Kins are here to help you in your most difficult life circumstances. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Steve Francisco. Minnesota and the nation, unfortunately, have witnessed a terrible tragedy that occurred in our state with the political assassination of a leader in the Minnesota legislature, former Speaker, State Representative Melissa Hortman, and her husband Mark were tragically killed in this assassination. There was also an attempt on the life of State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette, who were shot multiple times. Thankfully, they are hopefully on the road to recovery. Senator Hoffman's wife, it is reported she has been released from the hospital. But the horror of this story has only amplified with the news that other legislators were targeted in this horrible, horrific criminal attack. And fortunately, thank goodness for good police work, the assailant was thwarted in those efforts. Our guest today is familiar to most of our viewers. He's our good friend, State Senator Jim Carlson. Jim, welcome back to Access to Democracy on this very sad occasion.
Thank you very much, Steve.
I want to ask you, if you would, to start out, share your thoughts with us at this moment about the tragic events that have occurred with the murder of Representative Hortman and her husband, and just share with us your thoughts, if you would, about these events.
Well, thank you, Steve. There's so many things that have gone through my mind in this time since last Saturday night. And first of all, I do want to make sure that I give the Eagan Police as much praise as possible, because they kept us safe, they kept us informed. The public safety commissioner contacted all the police chiefs right away and said, you have a legislator in your district, so please put a car out in front of their house, tell them that you're protecting them, and make sure that it's visible, that the protection is visible. So we did have a squad in front of our house from sometime early Saturday morning until Sunday afternoon, until after the perpetrator was caught in custody. But it was a very, very tense time. Mm-hmm. And still today, we think about what we've done in the last couple of years here, being in the majority, and what we were planning to do next year. And all of a sudden, I come to realize she's gone. Melissa is gone. And now, going back quite a ways, in 2012, I ran for the Senate for the second time. And Melissa was running at the same time. So we were in the same class at that time. I'm sorry, then actually it was in 2004 the first time when she was running for the House and I was running for the House as well. And she won, I lost. But we were good friends at the time. We talked a lot about running again and what you should do, that sort of thing. So I got to know Melissa personally. And
had you met her husband, Mark, as well?
I've only met him, I believe, one time when we were introduced, but I didn't know him well. I knew of her daughter, and there are people in this district that know her daughter very well. And she was a delightful person. But,
and she and Mark had a daughter and a son,
yes,
both adult children.
Colin is the son, and I didn't know him at all.
Right. And Melissa Hortman, since this tragedy occurred, it's really been remarkable, the outpouring of grief that we have seen from Minnesotans. Really, I have to say, across the political spectrum, there was a reaction from Republican leaders in the House, too, to the fact that this assailant, I am not going to dignify him by even mentioning his name on this broadcast, but the fact that he had this target list made up of DFL legislators who he was at variance with votes that they had taken, I believe, on the issue of choice.
It was several things, but
perhaps several issues.
Perhaps choice.
But the fact that he targeted DFL legislators specifically, and isn't it true it wasn't confined just to members of the legislature?
Correct.
It also included members of the Minnesota congressional delegation.
Yep.
And I understand it also targeted people in Wisconsin too.
That's what I hear. I haven't seen that. Now, if you, just to go back to the list was handwritten in his car because he was chased out of the Hortman's home out the back door. And the police found the list in his car, and so they transcribed it into one list. And so there were multiple notes. They transcribed it into one list. And that's the list that we talk about. And yes, it did have some people from, and I didn't know this until Sunday, that it had some people from Ohio and one from Pennsylvania, and I think one or two from Wisconsin. So yeah, it was a big threat, and it's national.
I think one of the things that has left Minnesotans and frankly people around the country in shock is, we had hoped perhaps that this kind of political violence would never occur anywhere in Minnesota. But as Minnesotans, I think it was very difficult for a lot of us to imagine that something this horrific would ever happen in our state. We thought that somehow we were an exception to the kind of political violence that we see, frankly, in other countries around the world that has now come home to our country. So are you surprised by the events that have unfolded in Minnesota, and what kind of warning signs should we have been picking up in recent times about this increase in violent political rhetoric?
Well, it's not new. This has been around for a long time. And there are still groups that are denying that this is even something that happened the way the news is telling it, the way the politicians are telling it. They're saying it's a false flag. It's like if you remember the Sandy Hook incident where, that was something perpetrated by the government just to get attention to either firearms issues or school funding or lots of different
And this was
like
the
that.
killing of the school children in Connecticut in 2012, I believe
Correct,
it was.
yes. And and we need to understand that these people exist, that they hate the government. They hate the government with their every bone in their body, and they want no government. It's not just a matter of being a fascist government. They want no government.
So it's really anarchy?
Yes.
They're anarchist is what you're saying? Yeah.
And then what they do is they project anarchy on everyone else. The Democrats don't want government. The Republicans don't want government. It's kind of it's something for PhD mental health studies, I guess. But that's the fact, that there are these militias that have been out there. And now, unfortunately, I forgot to bring the books that I was going to bring and show you, but there is a book written by this federal prosecutor named Barbara McQuaid, and she talks about that. And then there was a law professor that has been on television a couple of times, and he talks about it, that they now have a method to get together, to coalesce. And so a lot of these fringe groups from all over the country are now communicating with each other.
On social media
on
platforms?
social media, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And, this is, when I say it's not new, Timothy McVeigh was part of this
The
organization.
Oklahoma City bomber.
Yeah. And he didn't care what the politics were of the people that he killed. He just wanted to kill them. He wanted to stop government.
Yeah. We should acknowledge, obviously, the law enforcement authorities, now prosecutors, both federal and state, are conducting very thorough investigation into this particular assailant's background, what his political views were, examining who he may have communicated with, examining whether anybody else was involved in a conspiracy to commit these assassinations here in Minnesota. But I mean, we've even seen at the very top of the political ladder President Trump condoning political violence against his adversaries. We saw him pardon over 1,000 people who were convicted of violence at the United States Capitol, which resulted in the death of law enforcement officers. Both one officer who was sprayed with bear spray, I believe, the day of January 6th. The next day he suffered a massive stroke and died. Other police officers who committed suicide. So, what are your thoughts about this when we see this kind of radical political rhetoric being espoused from the very top office holder of the United States?
Well, I think that we've gotten close to this before. And, we have a very strong country, a very strong constitution. And when we follow it, it's going to save us. So what we need to do is make sure that people know what protections we have by the Constitution, what our duty is to help get people involved in our government so that, we call it self-government. I can't tell you how many times that I have said that in emails to constituents when they talk about the things that are not happening the way they like. And I'll say, you got to get involved, because that's the basics of our government, is self-government.
Right.
Because you are the government.
The very essence, it seems, of democracy is that we talk to each other as citizens. We talk to each other and share ideas. We don't necessarily always agree.
Yeah.
We work on political campaigns to elect people that we want to carry our views, in your case, to carry the views of the people you represent here in the South Metro to St. Paul, to the Minnesota Senate. And there are numerous people that have worked on political campaigns. I certainly worked on my share, and not all those candidates have won. But you go back to the drawing board, you try again to persuade people to accept your arguments and perhaps to vote for a particular issue or vote for a certain way. But there's no guarantee in a democracy that you're always going to win. In fact, you're not always going to win, but you accept that this is the system we have. Otherwise, it is this anarchy you described, this kind of political violence. Jim, I want to ask you more specifically, there's a lot of concern we've had that we've heard articulated from a lot of sources in recent times about the rise of AI, artificial intelligence, that now you are seeing political commercials and political memes, if you will, posted on social media, inventing things that people did not say and presenting it as fact. And like taking, for example, your image as State Senator Jim Carlson and attributing language to you that you never said. And then putting that out as fact. My question to you is really this. When we look at this landscape, this strikes me as a huge threat to our democracy. Can American democracy survive this age of deliberate disinformation, distortion, and angering people to the point that they will commit political violence?
Well, I'm no genius, and so I'm not sure if I can give a comfortable reasoning on that, answer to that. Although it might be something that we can learn from, where we start to learn that don't believe everything you see coming out, coming onto your computer, coming onto your social media, coming out on literature. And I think that as we educate our young people, they need to be educated on critical thinking. If it doesn't look right, then look into it. Don't just repeat it. And so that's what we've been doing, is repeating things because we believed that everything on the internet was true.
Well, and maybe also not looking to one outlet for all of your information. Like, I like to read lots of different points of view, different publications, watch different media, including media that I often don't agree with. I don't share that same political perspective. And do you think that helps citizens and voters to be better, well-rounded, if you will,
Yes,
in terms
absolutely.
of being citizens?
Absolutely, yes. That's, I get criticized by my family sometimes that I'm going to something that I don't agree with everybody there. And no, you should just stay home. No,
But
no,
isn't that your job?
Yeah, that's
I
my
mean,
job.
your job
It's
as a
my job.
senator, you represent the people that
Yep.
didn't vote for you just as surely as you represent the people who did.
But I could also tell you, I mean, there are people that we talk about in politics that we really have grown to hate. And some of them are in the Minnesota Senate. And I deal with those folks. I sit next to them sometimes. And they're really not any different than I am. They want the same things. And I've worked with some of the people that are actually quite far to the right. When I'm, you could say I'm far to the left, but they're as far to the right as I am to the left. And I've worked on things with them. And we've gotten a bill passed that satisfies, or actually that we're both happy to get passed. So, we have to get to know each other. That's important. And, I can't say that I'm going to, let me restate. I can't say that this friend of mine, I'm going to put a bullet in his head if I know him, if I know his family, if I know what he's thinking, and I know that I can walk up to him and talk to him about something.
Yeah.
So that's going to save us, I think, is to, shut our screens down once in a while and, get familiar with what AI might do that are good things, because there are good things that's going to come.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah,
people are not realizing today that, let's say, Google is using AI a lot. You can ask Google a question verbally, and you'll get an answer that's well thought through.
When you think about it, I'm glad you raised that point, because so many new inventions have both a good side and a bad side. The advent of the internet, people thought, oh, this is great, we're going to connect with people all over the world. But we've also seen how some people have misused the internet. I'm thinking of instances of cyberbullying, putting up content that distorts and attacks people in very personal ways, invasions of privacy. So it can be used for good or bad. The same is true with artificial intelligence. Has tremendous potential for unlocking the secrets of solving illnesses and disease, but also can be used to distort reality. And it's really the obligation of us as citizens in a free country to ferret that out, to think about what we're consuming, and always asking the question, is this true?
On that, I can tell you a little bit about this. I'm not totally conversant on it, but something called notification. Notification is the ability to go to a certain AI spot or site or some inquiry, and you send them a picture of Jim Carlson, and it comes back with me without any clothes on. And that is being done now, with especially with attractive Hollywood stars. Notification. And so we actually have a bill that if you get caught with that there's a certain remedy that can be done, and it eventually goes to prison. So
criminal penalties for that.
So and the senator from Apple Valley is really up to date on that, and she wants this to be self-detecting, and also so that it can't be done without the identification of who is doing it. But I was going to say, let's go back a bit. I remember when telephone answerers were not trusted. Email was not trusted. So we've gotten over some of those humps, and I think we'll get over AI as well.
I hope you're right. Let's talk about a few of the key developments that occurred in the legislative session that just wrapped up. This was a budget year. The state of Minnesota operates on a biennial, a 2-year budget, and after a 1-day special session, the legislature finally finished its work. One of the key provisions that attracted a lot of attention was a rollback for Minnesota Care for undocumented adult immigrants in Minnesota. And I have to mention here, this was one of the late Representative Melissa Hortman's final statements. You could see listen to the emotion in her voice as she talked about this difficult decision to take people off from health care, to take adult undocumented immigrants off health care. And this was to get to a budget solution.
I need to stop you just for a second. Because there's a misunderstanding on it and a misstatement about it being health care. It's subsidized health care.
Subsidized,
It was subsidized by the federal government. And the reason it is that hospitals are going out of business because they have to eat all this uncompensated care. And so the federal government offered it that we could sign up for Medicare that is subsidized, and the states had to come up with their method of subsidy. And you can, I think you can still go online today and look up Medicare, subsidized Medicare, and you'll find it all described how much it costs you or how much your subsidy is based on your income.
Right.
So if you have a high income and you're an undocumented individual, you can pay for it yourself.
Right.
You can buy it.
But a key point was here, they were able to protect continuation for children, but it was adults that part of the agreement to get to this budget deal was that the Democratic leaders had to basically accept this change. That doesn't mean people don't get sick anymore. They're just going to be showing up now in the emergency room, and the cost of that care is passed on to who?
The hospital has to eat it, and it comes out in the overhead of the hospital.
At a time when we're finding many hospitals, especially in rural Minnesota, are struggling with keeping up with increasing costs. And many of those rural hospitals may be forced to close. Some of them already have closed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's a complicated issue, and it is something that if people are interested in that, they should call up someone who is savvy with it, maybe a hospital administrator, and get them to explain it to them. Because the fact is that now, why do you have health insurance? Well, one of the big things is diagnoses. It's, I don't feel well, so I need to go in and see the doctor, and I don't have a doctor, and I don't have insurance, so I go into the emergency room for diagnosis. And that's what's terribly expensive. That's the most expensive health care you can opt
which
for.
is not really the ideal model of health care, is that you want to prevent situations, health care situations, before they become very dangerous to the individual, threaten their life or their health, and also when they're easier and less expensive to treat, right?
I mean, today, if I thought I might have been exposed to measles, and I need to find out if I have them, if I have measles, and I was an undocumented and uninsured person, I don't have a choice but to go to a hospital and ask them to check me out. So that's the kind of thing, that's the real cases that we have. And now if I don't have insurance, if I'm afraid to go to the hospital, afraid I'm going to get, let's say, arrested if I go into the hospital, then I don't go. And it threatens all the people around me because I have measles.
And we should be very clear, when somebody comes into the emergency room at a public hospital, a facility like Hennepin County Medical Center, HCMC, Hennepin Health, they can't turn them away, right? Because they don't have insurance. That's where this issue of uncompensated care comes in.
And that's a federal law, by the way.
Right.
That's a federal law that they can't turn them away.
Very interesting. I want to ask you about another issue. We're down to a few minutes here. Decision was made to move toward closure of the Stillwater State Prison. And there is some controversy in this because a number of people have said, well, What's the plan for where these inmates are going to go? What's the timeline going to be? Say a word about this decision to move toward closing Stillwater.
Well, I'm a little disappointed at how the public has been given explanations and maybe some lack of information. The idea was to close it over 5 years. So it was going to be a long time. And there are a lot of long-time employees there that may be retiring. In fact, it's just like any business. You know how many people are going to retire in the next 5 years. You have that kind of information because you need to do it for your insurer.
What they call attrition, employee attrition.
So, there will be some of those folks that will be ready to retire. And so it's not like we're going to have a huge number of people that are going to be personally affected. However, there is no plan to replace that building. So it's going to require these inmates to be spread around the state.
To other existing facilities.
And that means that there's going to be a bit of a let's say, an inability of someone who's been a long time Stillwater employee to go to this new prison and pick up their job again. So that's the thing that is most upsetting. And I believe it's the SEIU
Service
union.
Employees International Union.
That they've been upset because they weren't given the
which
heads up.
represents the guards, the corrections officers. But again, the key point I think for folks to understand, this wasn't going to happen next year. It's a longer timeline, so there's time to prepare for it. I want to ask you about another piece of legislation that was dealt with this year, DWI policy reform, driving while intoxicated or under the influence. There was, of course, a terrible tragedy in St. Louis Park last year at Park Tavern where several people enjoying a night out at the restaurant were killed by a drunken driver. This legislative change requires that people who have multiple DWI convictions need to use ignition interlock devices to operate a vehicle. It extends the time for them to be able to have to use that if they have these convictions on their record. And say a word about that if you would.
Well, we've always tried to be fair with DWI convictions. Now, it's kind of it's a conflict in itself. But the fact is that if you convict somebody of DWI and you take away their driver's license, you're also taking away their ability to
get to work.
Earn an income. And so we had, and not everybody knows, when you see a white license plate and it has W at the beginning, we call those whiskey license plates. And that's what a convicted DWI person would get to put onto their car. And that had certain limitations on when and where you could drive. Plus, the police could stop you at any time and test you when you had a W license plate. Now, we thought that was a bit harsh, and so we did institute the interlock, which you have to breathe into, and then that would allow your car to start.
Which, if you're obviously over the limit or close to it, the vehicle won't start. So an additional public safety measure that was taken there.
And you could make it so that it's zero, you cannot have any alcohol, or you can have something that's a legal limit. So it's a little bit more programmable. And also, some of those systems have facial recognition where you get into the car and you start the car and it verifies that you're the person that owns that car.
Senator Jim Carlson, I want to tell you we express our condolences on the loss of Melissa Hortman to you and all legislators. Thank you for your work that you and our public servants do representing the people of Minnesota, and thank you for being our guest again on Access to Democracy.
Thank you, Steve. I just hope everybody thinks about it when they talk about politicians.
Thank you.
So.